The morning sun felt cruel on Lyra's skin as the elven guards dragged her toward the marketplace. Her hands were bound with silver chains that burned against her wrists. Above her head, two small dragons circled and cried out in distress. Ash was the color of smoke and shadow. Amber glowed like dying coals. They wanted to help their bonded companion, but the magical chains prevented them from attacking anyone in the crowd. Lyra had lived in the forest village of Silverbrook for 200 years. She was a healer. People came from distant lands to seek her help. She could mend broken bones with a touch. She could cure fevers that killed others. The elders praised her gift and said she would do great things for their people. Everything changed 3 months ago. The fertility tests came back. Every elf woman took these tests when they reached their 3rd century. It was tradition. It was law. The results determined your worth in elven society. Lyra's results showed the worst possible outcome. She could not bear children. Her body would never carry the next generation. The council met that same night. They discussed her case for hours. Some argued she should stay because of her healing abilities. Others said the law was clear. An infertile elf woman had no place in their community. She consumed resources that could go to fertile women. She took up space needed for families. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Lyra would be sold at auction. They gave her 3 days to prepare. Guards watched her cottage to make sure she did not run. Friends and neighbors who once smiled at her now looked away when she passed. Her own sister refused to speak with her. The shame was too great. Being infertile meant you were defective. It meant nature had rejected you. No amount of healing skill could overcome that stain. Now she stood on the wooden auction block in the human marketplace. The trader who bought her from the Elven Council yanked her forward. He was a fat man with gold rings on every finger. He shouted about her qualities to the gathered crowd. Strong back, good teeth, trained in medicine. 2 dragons included in the price. Human farmers and merchants walked around the platform. They looked at her like she was a horse or a cow. Some squeezed her arms to test her strength. Others asked the trader about her temperament. Would she run away? Would she cause trouble? The trader assured them she was broken and obedient. He lied. Lyra still had fire in her heart, but she hid it well. The bidding started high because dragons were valuable, even small ones. But when the trader mentioned she was infertile, the interest died. Humans did not care as much as elves about bloodlines, but they still wanted workers who could eventually have families. Families meant more workers in the future. An infertile woman was a dead-end investment. The price dropped lower and lower. The trader grew angry. He had paid good money to the Elven Council. He expected to make a profit. He began adding promises to the sale. The woman was skilled at healing animals. She could read and write. She was quiet and would not complain. Still nobody bid. Lyra felt relief mixed with fear. If nobody bought her, the trader might sell her to the mines. She had heard stories about those places. Workers died within a year from the toxic air and brutal conditions. Or worse, he might sell her across the sea to the southern kingdoms where slavery was legal and life was cheap. The sun climbed higher in the sky. The crowd began to thin. People had crops to tend and shops to open. They could not waste all day watching a failed auction. The trader's face turned red with frustration. He dropped the price again. Now Lyra cost less than a breeding sow. Just when the trader was about to give up, a voice called out from the back of the marketplace. It was quiet but clear. A bid. The trader's eyes widened. He could not see who spoke. The crowd parted and a young human man walked forward. He was perhaps 30 years old by human measure. Tall and lean with sun-darkened skin. His clothes were patched and worn. Dirt stained his fingernails. His boots had holes, but his eyes were kind and steady. He looked directly at Lyra, not through her like the others had done. The trader asked if he was serious. The young man nodded. He pulled a small leather pouch from his belt and counted out coins. It was exactly the asking price. The trader grabbed the money before anyone could interrupt. He struck his wooden hammer on the post. Sold. The deal was done. The young man climbed onto the platform. He used a small key to unlock Lyra's chains. The silver bonds fell away and the burns on her wrists began to heal immediately. Above them, Ash and Ember stopped their panicked circling. They could sense the change in their companion's situation. The man introduced himself. His name was Peter Brooks. He owned a farm east of town. He said he needed help with the animals and crops. His voice was gentle. He did not sound like a master speaking to property. He sounded like someone asking for assistance from an equal. Lyra studied his face for signs of cruelty or deception. She found none. This confused her more than if he had been obviously evil. Why would a poor farmer spend his limited money on an infertile elf and 2 hungry dragons? What did he really want from her? She decided to ask directly. Peter smiled. It was a sad, tired smile. He explained that his farm was failing. The soil was poor. The previous owner had given up after bad harvests. He inherited the land from his grandfather, but he was losing it slowly to debt. He needed someone who understood animals and plants, someone who could help him save his family's legacy. He had heard her speak to the trader about her healing skills. He took a chance. Lyra asked the question that burned in her mind. Why did he not care that she was infertile? Peter looked genuinely puzzled. He said he was not buying a wife or breeding stock. He was hiring a worker. Whether she could have children or not meant nothing for the work that needed doing. Besides, he added quietly, the world already had enough people and not enough kindness. Something in Lyra's chest loosened at those words. For 3 months she had been treated as worthless garbage. Every person she knew had rejected her because her body could not perform one specific function. This stranger with dirt under his nails and holes in his boots was the first person to see her as more than a womb with legs. She agreed to come with him. What choice did she have? But for the first time since the test results came back, she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe life outside her old village would not be endless suffering. Maybe there was still purpose for someone like her. Peter led her through the marketplace toward the east road. Ash and Ember landed on her shoulders. Their weight was comforting and familiar. Behind them, the trader counted his coins and the crowd dispersed. Nobody paid attention to the strange group leaving town. A poor farmer, a broken elf woman, and 2 small dragons walking toward an uncertain future together. The walk to Peter's farm took 3 hours. The road was dusty and dry. Late summer heat made the air shimmer. Lyra's feet hurt in the thin shoes the Elven Council had given her. Everything she owned fit in a small cloth bag. 2 dresses, a comb, a few herbs for medicine. That was all they let her take from her old life. Peter noticed her limping but said nothing. He simply slowed his pace to match hers. Ash and Ember flew ahead and then circled back like scouts checking the path. They were young dragons only 15 years old. Still learning, still growing. In another century they would be large enough to ride. Now they were barely bigger than hunting dogs. The landscape changed as they walked. The bustling town gave way to scattered farms. Then those farms grew further apart. The soil looked thinner and rockier. Fewer crops grew in the fields. Some farms appeared abandoned with broken fences and collapsed barns. This was the poor edge of the settlement where only desperate or stubborn people tried to make a living. Finally, Peter turned down a narrow path. Weeds grew thick on both sides. At the end stood a small farmhouse. The roof sagged in one corner. Paint peeled from the walls. The barn behind it leaned dangerously to the left. A few scraggly chickens pecked at the dry ground. 3 goats watched their arrival with bored expressions. This was Peter's inheritance. This was what he was trying to save. Lyra felt her heart sink. She had expected poor conditions, but this was worse than she imagined. The farm looked ready to collapse completely. How could anyone make a living here? How could she possibly help with her limited skills? Maybe the trader had been right. Maybe she was worthless after all. Peter saw her expression. He laughed, but it was not a cruel sound. He admitted the place looked terrible. His grandfather had been a good farmer, but age and illness had destroyed him in his final years. The farm fell into disrepair. Peter had been trying to fix it for 2 years with little success. Every time he solved one problem, another appeared. But he refused to give up. This land was all he had left of his family. He showed Lyra around the property. The house had 3 rooms, a main living area with a fireplace, a small bedroom, a cramped kitchen with a wood stove. Everything was clean but worn. Furniture was simple and old. No decorations, no comfort items, just the bare necessities for survival. Behind the house was a storage shed. Peter explained she could sleep there. It was not fancy, but it was dry and private. He had already put a cot inside along with a blanket. Lyra looked inside. The space was tiny, barely big enough to turn around. But it was hers. She had not had private space since the guards came to take her away. Next, Peter showed her the barn. It was in worse shape than the house. Holes in the walls let in wind and rain. The roof had missing shingles. Inside were 2 cows, a old mule, and space for the goats and chickens at night. He pointed to an empty corner. That could be for the dragons if they wanted shelter. Ash and Ember immediately flew over to investigate. They seemed pleased with the arrangement. The fields were Peter's biggest problem. 20 acres of land, but only 5 were producing anything. The soil was exhausted. The previous crops had drained all the nutrients. Peter did not have money for fertilizer or new seeds. He was trying to rotate crops and let some fields rest, but it was slow work. This year's harvest would barely cover his debts. Lyra walked through the struggling crops. Corn grew stunted and yellow. Beans produced few pods. Squash vines looked diseased. She knelt and touched the earth. It felt dead under her fingers. No life force, no energy, just dry dirt that crumbled to dust. She understood now why Peter needed help. This land was dying. They returned to the house as the sun set. Peter cooked a simple meal, bread and vegetable soup. He gave Lyra the larger portion without comment. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. The food was plain, but it was hot and filling. Better than the scraps she had eaten in the holding cell before the auction. After dinner, Peter explained the work schedule. He woke before dawn to tend the animals, feed and water them, collect eggs from the chickens, milk the cows. Then he worked the fields until noon. After a brief rest, he did maintenance on the buildings and fences. Evening was for more animal care and preparing the next day's tasks. The work never ended. He asked what skills Lyra had besides healing. She thought carefully. In her old village, she had tended a large garden. She knew herbs and medicinal plants. She understood animal behavior from working with her dragons. She could sew and mend clothing. She could preserve food for winter. She was strong despite her thin appearance. Elves did not tire as quickly as humans. Peter seemed pleased with this list. He suggested she start by helping with the animals. They were sick more often than they should be. If she could keep them healthy, that would save money on replacing dead livestock. Also, she could examine the crops and see if her healing magic worked on plants. He had no idea if that was possible, but it was worth trying. That night, Lyra lay on her cot in the storage shed. Ash and Ember curled up beside her, providing warmth. Through the thin wall, she could hear night insects and distant animal sounds. The bed was hard. The blanket was scratchy. But she felt safer than she had in months. Peter had not hurt her. He had not even touched her. He treated her like a person, not property. She thought about her old life. Her comfortable cottage. Her respected position. Her friends and family. All gone because her body failed one test. The bitterness rose in her throat. How could they throw her away so easily? How could 200 years of service mean nothing compared to her ability to breed? But, lying here in this tiny shed on a failing farm, she also felt something unexpected. Freedom. In Silverbrook, every moment of her life had been scheduled and judged. Wear the right clothes, say the right things, follow all the rules, never question tradition, never complain about your role. Here on this poor human farm, nobody was watching. Nobody cared about her bloodline or her status. She was just a worker trying to survive. The next morning, Peter woke her before dawn. Time to start work. Lyra dragged herself from bed. Her body ached from sleeping on the thin cot. She splashed water on her face from a bucket and followed Peter to the barn. The cows looked sick. Their eyes were dull. Their coats were rough. One was barely eating. Peter said she had been getting worse for weeks. He could not afford the animal doctor. If the cow died, he would lose a major source of income. Milk and cheese were his most reliable products. Lyra approached the sick cow slowly. Animals could sense fear and tension. She kept her movements calm and steady. She placed her hands on the cow's side and let her healing magic flow. It was different from healing people. Animals had simpler bodies. Simpler problems. She could feel the infection in the cow's stomach. Bad feed probably, or contaminated water. She worked for an hour, slowly drawing out the sickness, replacing it with healthy energy. When she finished, the cow's eyes looked brighter. It nuzzled her hand gently. Peter watched in amazement. He had never seen healing magic work on animals before. He asked if she could do the same for the other animals. Lyra nodded. It would take time, but yes, she could help them all. Over the next week, Lyra settled into a routine. Mornings were for animal care. She healed injuries and illnesses. She made sure they had clean water and good food. She talked to them gently, and the animals began to trust her. The chickens laid more eggs. The goats produced better milk. Even the old mule seemed more energetic. Afternoons she worked in the fields. She tried using her healing magic on the struggling plants. At first nothing happened. Plant magic was different from animal magic. More subtle, more patient. But gradually she learned to feel the life force in the crops. She encouraged growth. She fought diseases. She strengthened roots. The changes were small but visible. Peter watched the improvements with growing hope. For 2 years he had fought alone against failure. Now he had help. Real meaningful help. He began to believe maybe he could save the farm after all. Maybe buying the strange elf woman and her dragons was the best decision he ever made. Lyra also felt something changing inside her. The anger and shame were still there. The wound was too fresh to heal completely. But working with her hands and seeing results gave her purpose. She mattered here. Her skills had value. She was not worthless garbage to be thrown away. She was needed. Winter came early that year. The first frost arrived in late October, turning the ground hard. Lyra and Peter worked frantically to harvest what crops they could and prepare the farm for cold weather. The animals needed extra shelter. The barn needed repairs to keep out wind and snow. Firewood had to be cut and stacked. There was always more work than hours in the day. Despite the challenges, the farm was doing better than it had in years. The animals were healthy and productive. The harvest was modest, but enough to pay debts and buy supplies for winter. Peter even had a little money left over. He used it to buy Lyra a warm coat and boots. She protested, but he insisted. She could not work if she froze to death. Their relationship had settled into comfortable partnership. Peter treated Lyra with respect. He asked her opinion on farm decisions. He shared meals with her in the house instead of making her eat alone. He never mentioned that he owned her, never reminded her that she was purchased property. Sometimes Lyra almost forgot she was not free. The dragons had grown attached to Peter. Ash and Ember followed him around the farm. They helped herd the goats. They scared away predators that threatened the chickens. At night they slept in the barn, keeping the animals warm with their body heat. Peter talked to them like they were people. He learned their different personalities. Ash was cautious and thoughtful. Ember was bold and playful. One frozen morning in early December, Peter came running to find Lyra. His face was pale. His hands shook. Something was wrong. Lyra dropped the feed bucket she was carrying and followed him. They ran behind the house to the old storage shed. Not the one where Lyra slept. A different one, older and more decrepit. Peter used it for broken tools and junk. The door was slightly open. Peter pointed inside. Lyra stepped through the doorway and stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. On the dirt floor were 2 tiny babies wrapped in torn blankets. They were crying. Weak, pitiful sounds. Their lips were blue from cold. Their small bodies trembled. Lyra knelt beside them. She pulled back the blankets. Both babies were elven. She could tell by their slightly pointed ears and the silver tint to their hair. Twins. A boy and a girl. No more than a few weeks old. Someone had left them here to die, abandoned them in an unheated shed in freezing weather. Rage and heartbreak flooded through Lyra. Who could do this? What kind of monster left helpless infants to freeze? She scooped up both babies and held them against her chest. They were so cold, so fragile. She called for Ash and Ember. The dragons came immediately. They curled around Lyra and the babies. Their natural heat began to warm the tiny bodies. Peter stood in the doorway looking shocked. He asked where they came from. Lyra shook her head. She did not know. Someone must have come in the night, snuck onto the farm, left the babies in the shed. It had to be elves. Human babies would not have silver hair, but why leave them here? Why not take them to an orphanage or temple? Then understanding hit her. These babies were unwanted for some reason. Born to an unwed mother, perhaps. Or maybe they had some defect that elven society could not accept. Maybe one of the parents was not pure-blooded. Whatever the reason, the babies were considered worthless. Better to let them die quietly than deal with the shame. Just like Lyra had been worthless because she could not breed. The boy baby's crying grew weaker. He was in worse shape than his sister. Lyra focused her healing magic. She poured energy into his small body, fighting the cold damage, strengthening his heart and lungs. Peter brought more blankets. He started a fire in the shed's old stove. Ash and Ember never moved from their protective circle. It took 3 hours, but finally both babies stabilized. Their color improved. Their crying grew stronger. They were hungry, desperately hungry. Lyra had no milk to give them. She was not their mother. But goat milk might work if she mixed it properly with water and a little honey. Peter ran to get supplies. He came back with bottles and clean cloth for diapers. He had younger siblings who died of fever years ago. His mother had taught him about baby care before she passed. Together he and Lyra fed the twins. The babies sucked greedily at the bottles, life returning to their tiny bodies. When the babies finally slept, Lyra and Peter sat by the fire. They needed to decide what to do. Peter said they should report this to the authorities. Someone would take the babies, find them a proper home. Lyra felt panic rise in her chest. She knew what would happen. The babies would go to an orphanage. They would be labeled as rejects, as damaged goods, just like her. They would grow up knowing nobody wanted them. She surprised herself by saying no. They should keep the babies. Raise them here. Peter stared at her. He pointed out all the obvious problems. They barely had enough money for themselves. Babies were expensive. They needed clothes and food and medicine. The farm could not support 4 people plus dragons and animals. It was impossible, Lyra argued back. She could heal the babies if they got sick. That saved money. The farm was producing more now. They could make it work. These children were abandoned just like she was abandoned. Someone needed to choose them. Someone needed to say they had value. She looked Peter in the eyes and asked him to trust her. Peter was quiet for a long time. He looked at the sleeping babies, then at Lyra, then at Ash and Ember standing guard. Finally he sighed. He said they could try, but if things got too hard, they would need to find the babies a better home. Lyra agreed, even though she had no intention of ever giving them up. The next morning the authorities came. Someone in town had heard rumors about elven babies. A traveling merchant saw suspicious figures near Peter's farm during the night. The sheriff and 2 deputies arrived asking questions. Peter told them the truth. He found the babies abandoned on his property. He planned to raise them himself. The sheriff was skeptical. A poor farmer raising elf twins. That would be difficult, expensive. Maybe the babies should go to the temple orphanage in the city. Peter stood firm. He said the law was clear. Property found on your land belonged to you. The babies were found on his land. Therefore they were his responsibility. Lyra stood beside him holding the twins, daring anyone to take them. The deputies looked uncomfortable. One of them muttered about checking with the Elven Council. Maybe the babies belonged to some important family. Maybe there would be a reward. The sheriff nodded. He said he would investigate. In the meantime, Peter could keep the babies, but he better take good care of them. If they came back and found neglect, there would be consequences. After the authorities left, Peter slumped in his chair. He asked Lyra what they had gotten themselves into. She did not have a good answer. She only knew that when she held those babies, something broken inside her began to heal. For 3 months she had been told she was worthless because she could not have children. Now she had 2 children who needed her, not because of biology, because of choice. She named them River and Sky. River for the girl because she was strong and persistent like flowing water. Sky for the boy because he was gentle and peaceful like a clear morning. Peter thought the names were strange, but he did not argue. Lyra was already acting like their mother, already bonding with them in ways he did not fully understand. The first weeks were brutal. Babies needed constant care, feeding every few hours, diaper changes, rocking when they cried. Lyra barely slept. Peter helped when he could, but the farm work still demanded attention. Animals still needed tending. Winter preparation could not stop. They were exhausted and overwhelmed. Then River got sick. High fever. Difficulty breathing. Lyra recognized the symptoms. Lung infection. Common in premature or weak babies. Often fatal without proper treatment. She worked through the night, pouring healing magic into River's small body, fighting the infection, strengthening her immune system. Peter sat beside her holding Sky, watching, praying to whatever gods might listen. Dawn came and River's fever broke. She began breathing easier. Color returned to her cheeks. She even smiled. A tiny innocent smile directed at Lyra. In that moment, Lyra knew she would die before letting anything hurt these children. They were hers. Not by blood, not by law, but by something deeper and more powerful than either of those things. Sky got sick 2 days later. Same infection, same desperate fight. But this time, Lyra was ready. She caught it earlier, fought harder. Sky recovered faster than his sister. The twins were strong, survivors, just like their new mother. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth and new hope. The farm had survived winter. Barely. Money was tight, but everyone had enough to eat. The animals were healthy. Most importantly, River and Sky were thriving. At 6 months old, they were alert and curious. They smiled and laughed. They reached for everything with tiny hands. They had no idea they were supposed to be unwanted. Lyra moved into the main house. It made no sense for her to sleep in the shed when the babies needed her during the night. Peter gave her the small bedroom. He slept on a cot near the fireplace. The arrangement was practical, not romantic. They were partners raising children together, friends, maybe even family in a strange way. But nothing more. The farm changed dramatically as spring progressed. Lyra's healing magic had restored life to the soil. The fields that had been dead and exhausted now burst with green growth. Seeds sprouted faster and stronger than normal. Plants resisted disease. Crops that usually failed in poor soil flourished. Peter walked through the fields in amazement. This was better than anything his grandfather had achieved in his prime years. Word spread about the miracle farm. Merchants came from town to see for themselves. They offered good prices for Peter's vegetables, better than he had ever received before. They said his produce tasted different, richer, more flavorful. Customers asked for his goods specifically. Peter realized he might actually turn a profit this year. The twins grew fast, faster than human babies but normal for elves. By their first birthday, they were walking and starting to talk. River was bold and adventurous. She climbed everything, got into everything, laughed at danger. Sky was quieter and more thoughtful. He watched the world with serious eyes. He preferred books to running around. Both children adored the dragons. Ash and Ember had become gentle babysitters. They let the twins climb on them. They flew low circles so the children could watch. They protected River and Sky from any perceived threat. Once a wild dog wandered onto the farm. It growled at Sky. Ember breathed a small jet of flame that singed the dog's tail. The animal ran away yelping. No wild creatures bothered the farm after that. The children called Lyra Mama without anyone teaching them. It happened naturally. She was the one who fed them, who healed them when they were sick, who sang them to sleep, who kissed their foreheads. She was their mother in every way that mattered. Peter they called Papa. He was the one who played rough games, who carried them on his shoulders, who told silly stories, who protected them. They were a family, but the outside world did not see it that way. Elves from nearby communities heard about the infertile healer raising twins. Some were curious, others were judgmental. They came to see if the rumors were true. They stood at the farm gate and stared, whispered to each other, pointed at the children. One autumn afternoon, 3 high elven women arrived. They wore expensive robes, heavy jewelry. Their hair was styled in elaborate designs. They looked at the modest farmhouse with obvious disgust. They demanded to see the elf children. Peter tried to send them away, but Lyra said no. Let them come. Let them see what they came to see. The women walked around the property examining everything. They watched River chase chickens while Sky picked flowers for Lyra. They saw how the dragons guarded the children, how Peter fixed a broken toy with gentle patience, how Lyra wiped dirty faces and laughed at childish jokes. The women's faces showed disapproval mixed with confusion. The eldest woman finally spoke. She said everyone wondered how an infertile elf could raise children. It was unnatural, against the laws of nature. Lyra asked what laws exactly. The woman struggled to answer. Well, it was tradition. It was proper. Fertile women raised children. That was how society worked. Lyra pointed out that these children would be dead if she followed those traditions. Dead in a frozen shed because they were inconvenient. The conversation grew heated. The women argued that Lyra was playing pretend. She was not a real mother. She did not birth these children. She had no biological bond with them. They were just orphans she was fooling into thinking she cared. River heard raised voices and ran to Lyra. She wrapped her small arms around Lyra's legs and called her Mama. Sky toddled over and did the same. The elven women stared at the children clinging to Lyra with obvious love and trust. They had no argument against that. They left angry but empty-handed. Lyra held her children close and cried. Not from sadness, from relief and joy. Her babies were safe. Nobody could take them away, not while she had breath in her body. Peter found her sitting on the porch with a child on each hip. He sat down beside them. He said something had been on his mind, something important. He wanted to make their family official, legal. He wanted to adopt the twins properly through human law, make them legally his children. And he wanted to free Lyra, release her from servitude, make her a free woman. A partner. A co-parent. Lyra was stunned. She had not dared hope for freedom. She assumed she would be Peter's property until she died or he sold her. The idea that he would give that up willingly seemed impossible. She asked why. Peter looked at River and Sky. He said because it was right. Because these children deserved parents who chose them freely. Because Lyra deserved dignity and choice. Because that was what family meant. They went to town the next week, saw the magistrate. Peter signed papers releasing Lyra from servitude. Then they filed adoption papers for both children, listed Peter Brooks and Lyra of Silverbrook as parents. The magistrate raised an eyebrow at the unusual arrangement but processed the documents. In the eyes of human law, River and Sky now had a father and mother. A real family. Life settled into a new rhythm. The farm prospered. Peter hired 2 young men from town to help with heavy work. He could afford it now. The house was expanded. More rooms. Better furniture. Comfort and security. Lyra started a small business selling healing services to local farmers. Their animals. Their crops. Her reputation grew. People traveled from distant villages to seek her help. The twins turned 3 years old. They were beautiful children with silver hair and bright eyes. River loved the outdoors. She wanted to be a dragon rider when she grew up. She practiced constantly with Ash and Ember. Sky discovered he had healing magic like Lyra, even stronger than hers. He could heal a cut with just a touch. Plants bloomed when he walked past them. Lyra was proud and slightly envious. Her son would never be called worthless because of his body's capabilities. One evening, Peter and Lyra sat on the porch watching the children play. The sun set in orange and purple streaks. Dragons circled overhead. The farm was peaceful and prosperous. Peter said he had been thinking about the future, about their family. He asked if Lyra ever thought about marriage. Not because she owed him anything, but because he genuinely cared for her, respected her, maybe even loved her. Lyra was quiet. In her old village, marriage was about bloodlines and alliances, about producing the next generation. She had rejected all that. Or rather, it had rejected her. But Peter was talking about something different. Partnership, companionship, building a life together with someone who saw your worth, someone who chose you every day. She said yes, not immediately. She needed time to think, to be sure. But a few weeks later, she said yes. They married in a simple ceremony under the old oak tree, where Ash and Ember first landed on the farm. River and Sky scattered flower petals. The dragons wove through the air, creating patterns of smoke and flame. A few friends from town attended. No elves came. Lyra did not invite any. The wedding was nothing like traditional elven ceremonies. No elaborate rituals. No discussions of bloodlines. No fertility blessings. Just 2 people promising to stand together. To support each other. To raise their children with love and patience. To build a life based on choice rather than obligation. Lyra wore a simple blue dress. Peter wore his best shirt. They held hands and spoke their vows. Ash and Ember roared approval. The children cheered. That night, after the twins were asleep, Lyra stood at the bedroom window looking out at the farm. Her farm now. Her home, her family. Everything she had been told she could never have because her body was defective. She had it all anyway, not through biology. Through choice and love and stubborn refusal to accept other people's judgment. Peter came up behind her, put his arms around her waist, asked what she was thinking. Lyra said she was thinking about worth, about value. Her old village measured worth by fertility and bloodline. They threw her away because she failed their test. But here on this farm with this man and these children and these dragons, she learned a different truth. Worth was not about what your body could do. It was about who you chose to be, what you gave to others, how you loved. She had been sold as defective property. Now she was a free woman, a healer, a mother, a wife, a partner in a successful farm. She had children who loved her absolutely, dragons who would die for her, a husband who saw her as equal, friends who respected her skills. She was not worthless. She never had been. Her old community was wrong. Their entire system of value was broken and cruel. Lyra turned in Peter's arms and kissed him. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges. The world would continue judging them. Other elves would whisper and stare. But none of that mattered. She had everything she needed. She had family, real family, built on choice and love rather than blood and obligation. That was worth more than all the approval in the world. 5 years passed. The children grew into bright, energetic youngsters. River was 8 now by human counting. Tall for her age, with her mother's silver hair that she refused to braid properly, she spent every free moment with Ash and Ember. The dragons had grown large enough for short flights with riders. River begged constantly to fly higher and faster. She feared nothing. Sky was quieter, but just as remarkable. His healing magic was extraordinary. Plants flourished wherever he walked. Sick animals recovered just from being near him. He had saved 3 neighbors' children from deadly fever. Word spread about the miracle healer boy. People brought their sick family members to the farm. Sky helped everyone he could. He never asked for payment. Lyra had to remind him that gifts of food or supplies were polite to accept. The farm was now the most successful in the region. Peter had expanded the fields, built a new barn, purchased more animals, hired several permanent workers. Travelers came specifically to buy produce from the Brooks farm. The vegetables and fruits were known for exceptional taste and long shelf life. Merchants paid premium prices. Money that once barely covered debts now allowed for comfort and even small luxuries. But success brought attention. And attention brought complications. One spring morning, a grand carriage arrived at the farm. It bore the crest of the Elven High Council. 6 guards on horseback accompanied it. Lyra felt ice in her stomach when she saw them. She called for the children to go inside. She told Peter to get the dragons. This would not be friendly. A high elven noble stepped from the carriage. Lord Aldrich. Lyra knew him by reputation. Member of the ruling council. Wealthy beyond measure. Connected to every important elven family. He looked at the farm with barely concealed disgust. Then his eyes found Lyra. Recognition flickered across his face. The infertile healer who was sold years ago. The one who should have disappeared into obscurity. Lord Aldrich announced his purpose. The twin children living on this farm were believed to be of noble blood. Specifically, they were believed to be his grandchildren. His daughter had become pregnant 8 years ago. Refused to name the father. The family suspected a human lover. Shameful, intolerable. The daughter gave birth secretly and the babies disappeared. Now rumors suggested those same babies were here. Lyra's hands clenched into fists. She asked why it mattered now. Lord Aldrich said the children were heirs to an important bloodline. They belonged with their real family, among their own kind. Not on a dirt farm with a defective elf and a human. He had come to take them home. He had legal documents, proof of lineage. The human authorities had already agreed. The children would be leaving today. Peter stepped forward. He said no. The children were legally adopted. River and Sky were his kids. Human law protected them. Lord Aldrich laughed. Human law meant nothing to elven nobility. He had paid the right bribes, made the right threats. The local magistrate had already reversed the adoption. The children belonged to him now. His guards moved toward the house. That was when Ash and Ember landed between the guards and the door. The dragons had grown to full adult size. Each was as large as a horse. Their scales gleamed in the sunlight. Smoke curled from their nostrils. The guards drew weapons but hesitated. Fighting dragons was suicide without proper preparation. Lord Aldrich looked alarmed. He had not expected resistance. The door opened. River and Sky walked out. They were small compared to the adults. Fragile looking, but they held their heads high. River spoke first. She said they heard everything. They understood Lord Aldrich claimed to be their grandfather. She asked why, if they were so important, he left them to die in a frozen shed. Why he waited 8 years to care about their existence. Lord Aldrich looked uncomfortable. He explained that was a misunderstanding. His daughter had acted rashly, made a mistake in her distress. But that was in the past. Now the family wanted to make things right. Give the children the life they deserved. Education, wealth, status, everything this poor farm could never provide. River laughed. It was not a child's laugh. It was cold and knowing. She said she remembered the shed. Not much, just cold and pain. being hungry and scared, then warmth, safety. Her mama's voice singing, her papa's gentle hands. She had everything she needed right here. She did not want wealth or status. She wanted her real family, the one that chose her when nobody else did. Sky nodded agreement. He said family was not about blood. It was about love and choice. Lord Aldrich's face turned red with anger. He declared the children were too young to understand. They had been brainwashed by these humans and their defective elf servant. He ordered his guards to seize the twins. The guards advanced. Ash roared. Ember breathed a stream of fire into the air. The guards stopped. Nobody wanted to fight angry dragons protecting children. Then something unexpected happened. The farm workers came running from the fields. The neighbors who had been helped by Sky's healing arrived. The merchants who traded with Peter. The families whose animals Lyra had saved. They formed a line between the elven nobles in the house. They said the Brooks family had helped them all, shown kindness, given aid without asking anything in return. They would not stand by and watch children stolen from their home. Lord Aldrich was furious. He threatened everyone with legal consequences, with elven retaliation, with economic sanctions. But he was outnumbered. His 6 guards could not fight dozens of determined humans backed by 2 full-grown dragons. He had expected an easy taking. He found a community willing to fight. He retreated to his carriage, spitting threats about returning with more force. After the nobles left, there was celebration. The neighbors cheered. The children hugged their parents. Peter thanked everyone who came to help. But Lyra knew this was not over. Lord Aldrich would return, with more guards, with legal authority, with force if necessary. Elven nobles did not accept defeat from humans and broken elves. She needed to find another solution. That night after the children slept, Lyra talked with Peter. She said they should run, take the family somewhere far away, start over where elven nobility had no reach. Peter pointed out they could not abandon the farm, all their work, their community, their life, and running would prove guilt, prove they had something to hide. Better to stand and fight, Lyra disagreed. She knew how elven politics worked. Lord Aldrich would twist laws, bribe officials, create evidence. He had resources and connections they could never match. They could not win this fight through normal channels. They needed something different. Something unexpected. She had an idea, but it was risky. The next morning, Lyra sent letters. Not to human authorities or elven councils. To other outcasts. To the infertile elves who had been sold or exiled. To the mixed-blood children rejected by both races. To the defective and unwanted. She told them what happened. Asked if they would come. Stand together. Show the world that family was not about blood or status or perfect genetics. It was about choice and love and courage. She did not know if anyone would respond. These were broken people, scattered, alone, ashamed. Why would they risk themselves for strangers? But 3 days later, the first arrived. An older elf woman who had been sold at 40 for failing fertility tests. Then a young man with mixed human and elf blood who belonged nowhere. Then a family with a disabled child who elves considered defective. Then more and more they came to the farm, dozens of them, all carrying stories of rejection and pain, all seeking something better. Lyra welcomed them, fed them, heard their stories. She asked if they would stand with her family against the High Elven Council, if they would show their faces, proclaim their worth despite what society said. It was dangerous. The council would retaliate. But together they might make enough noise to protect the children. 2 weeks later, Lord Aldrich returned. This time with 30 guards, with legal documents from the highest elven authorities, with representatives from the human government. He expected to simply take the children. Instead, he found over 100 people standing in front of the farmhouse. Infertile elves, mixed bloods, disabled outcasts, families that loved them, all standing together. Lyra stood at the front holding River and Sky's hands. She addressed Lord Aldrich directly. She said he could try to take the children, but he would have to go through all of them. And the world would see how elven nobility valued bloodlines over children's lives, valued genetics over love. She challenged him. Take the children by force and prove everything people suspected about elven cruelty, or leave and admit that family was more than biology. Lord Aldrich looked at the crowd, at the determination on their faces, at the dragons overhead, at the human neighbors filming everything with their devices. This was not what he wanted. This made him look like a villain, made the council look heartless. He had wanted a quiet retrieval. Instead, he got a public spectacle. He calculated quickly. This fight would damage Elven reputation more than winning was worth. He declared the children were clearly happy where they were. The Elven Council would allow them to stay for now, but he warned Lyra. She had made powerful enemies. The outcasts standing with her had revealed themselves. There would be consequences. Lyra met his gaze steadily. She said she was ready for consequences. She had already survived being thrown away. Nothing could be worse than that.